Mental distress, it affects millions of people across the country, but it is so hard to talk about. But I want to go and talk about this with Olly Alexander. He's a singer of Years and Years, a band who've done hits like Desire, King and Shine, but he's also an actor, film like The Riot Club, for example. And he's been open about his own struggle with mental distress. I want people out there watching this to think that this is something, they're not alone, there is help available, but there should be so much more help available as well. Looking back, in terms of mental distress, depression, anxiety, whatever, when did you first, do you think, encounter that?
I always had really, really bad nightmares, and I used to wake up in the middle of the night and not be able to move, and I think it's called, hear different things like sleep paralysis.
Yeah, sleep paralysis.
Yeah, and I'd hallucinate and have really scary visions and dreams and stuff.
Was it depression more than was it anxiety? How at that age?
I was really showing signs of being in distress, having issues with food, not eating, self-harm.
You had quite an unhappy time for a lot of school, didn't you?
I feel like who hasn't had a messy childhood, but I definitely did struggle quite a lot. My parents divorced when I was 13, and that was kind of, and up until that point we moved around a lot, so I was at different schools, and I think never really felt like I belonged anywhere. And
you said you were bullied at school?
Yes.
Like lots of young people are. But what was it like for you?
I started getting bullied at school in primary school, so I was 9 or 10, because kids can be so cruel at that age. I was obviously just a visibly weaker kid. School was it was a hostile place. I just hated being at school, and I think some people, they really thrive at being in that environment, but
quite oppressive in some ways.
Definitely. I think if you're not good at team sports, you're kind of you're fucked, if you know what I mean. When I first started school, I really went out of my way. I used to wear eyeliner and wear choker necklaces, and that obviously attracted attention. When you're that age, you're really, really trying to figure out your identity, who you are, and it just feels like you have to conform. You have to be. It's horrific to be ousted by your peers at that age.
Does it have lasting consequences for you to this day?
I mean, school's your first kind of taste of the world, I guess, isn't it? It's not just your family; it's interacting with, other people your own age, and yeah, if that's kind of a tough experience, I think that probably does really impact you on the rest of your life. But I've definitely had to work a lot on kind of building up a personal confidence.
When did you realise you were gay?
I was about 14 when I really fell in love with my best friend, and was obsessed with him at school. He was a year above.
Was he straight?
Yeah, I feel like that's a really classic story.
Classic heartbreak for gay men.
Things happen a lot. Even up until I was 17, I sort of wanted to be straight, so I would just keep telling myself, I'm straight, I think I'm straight, maybe I'm bisexual. And
you're this cannot be happening. This
is
the last thing.
Oh yeah,
This is the last thing that I need to deal with.
100%, yeah. I was please, just let me not be gay. I could just, do you know what I mean? I've got enough to deal with.
LGBT people generally have much higher levels of mental distress. That's particularly true with trans people, but also with gay men.
Yeah.
So do you think that's part of it? I mean, I don't know, with your own experience, do you think being gay has that fed into it?
Yeah, I think they're connected, definitely. Growing up in a straight world is difficult. Once you kind of admit to yourself and to the world that you're gay, there's this kind of expectation that you put on yourself in a way that you're fine now. Yeah. Because you have something to prove now. You've gone through the whole thing of actually being gay or not straight, and now you have to prove to yourself that you can live a happy life and you can be happy. And I think that's something I definitely have told myself and I've struggled with, because actually, of course I struggle and I'm going to get depressed and going to have anxiety. It's you tell yourself that you struggled enough, you shouldn't have those feelings,
Did you receive treatment as a teenager?
Not until I was 19. So I saw counsellors, and I did a bit of therapy on the NHS as well. Then I had cognitive behavioural therapy or CBT, and I started taking medication at 19 as well.
So what was your experience beforehand with the therapy sessions before CBT? What was your...
They were really difficult to get, really hard to get hold of. They took a really long time, and because I was not very proactive in getting them, because the initial stage was phone conversations, and I would not pick up the phone, and because I'd be, I didn't really want to go, and I didn't know if I really wanted to talk to someone about it, and then it was really it was hard, but it was still, I think it was a positive experience. I just don't think I was quite really ready to really talk about stuff. And then, yeah, once I got to 19, and I actually then went private. Well, I just paid for, I think a lot of therapists do private and NHS.
Was the CBT, do you think, was that useful?
I think with CBT, it's really helpful though if you have like a panic disorder or anxiety, which I was definitely experiencing at one stage. Also, psychotherapy and looking at the reasons why you might have the behaviours that you do have.
And what was the medical treatment you were taking?
Antidepressants. At one stage, I was taking diazepam, which is Valium, like a cocktail of medication.
If I broke an arm, you get a cast, and people, especially younger, they'd sign it and all the rest of it. There's no stigma attached, but with mental distress, there's still a huge amount of stigma.
If say you invite to a party, and and you're like, oh, I'm sick. I got sick. Like I've got a really bad cold. I'm sorry. I'm not going to go. That's like a totally acceptable thing to say. But if you say, I'm really depressed. Like I'm having a depressive episode. I've got to stay in bed. That feels much harder to say.
Of course, yeah.
I think attitudes are changing. The likelihood is that you or someone you know closely will suffer from a mental health condition in your lifetime. It's like any other part of your body, like your mental health. It gets sick, and it needs treatment when it gets sick. And
do you think the problem is, at the moment with the NHS, there's just a lack of provision?
I think the specific GP surgery I was at the time in London, the turnaround of doctors is unbelievable. It's like a revolving door. So every month there would be a different doctor. So each doctor's kind of like asking you all the same questions again and trying to learn the patient's history and understand you. I'm not trying to say I was given the wrong treatment, because I don't think I was, but I think it was difficult sometimes for them to be like, okay, this is what you need, this is the care you need. Do you know what I mean? Because it was such like they've got 10 minutes, they've not seen me before, they've got to see someone else, and they're under a lot of stress.
With the government, what would you like them to do in terms of services, whatever, for mental distress?
I care about mental health a lot. It's affected me and my family a lot, and I think, and it annoys me there's not enough provided, stuff's been cut where my family are from, I live now. It feels like there's less and less available. Like when I first started trying to get a counsellor on the NHS, this was about 10 years ago, there was like a 6-week waiting list, and now I'm told it's like 3 months, it can be, or longer. If there isn't anything provided for you to cope or to manage the situation, then it can be really detrimental and awful for so many people.
Since you first spoke, very honestly about your own mental distress. What response have you had?
I was quite shocked by the response of people going, oh my gosh, yeah, me too, thank you for speaking about it. It's just so common, it really is. Like and I feel like everyone can relate on some level to someone's experience of pain or mental distress. Like,
do you find fame and the expectations of it, all the pressure, scrutiny?
I'm sure I'd still be the same person and still kind of be coping with the same things, but it's a very odd situation to be in.
To have people you don't know talking about you and saying things about you, it's quite disorientating, I suppose.
It is, yeah, it's weird. And you're right, because I feel like, especially now in our social media age, like everyone's kind of a little bit famous, and everyone has to kind of feel like people being mean to them online. And it's just when you get to a certain level, the noise gets really, really loud. All these people are talking about me, and that kind of, I think, can screw you up. And I think it does screw people up.
What would you say to these people, particularly those going through it?
There is support out there. Because obviously I feel like the first thing you start to think is you're alone and you're crazy, possibly. But it's just not the case. Like, so many people experience similar things, the same thing. There is a support network out there, and make use of it. It's also part of just who you are. Like, if I could say now, like, I don't ever want to be depressed ever again, I don't ever want to feel these feelings, like I could press a button and make that happen. I probably wouldn't press it, because I'm unfortunate enough that I've had a support network for a while now, and I've learned a lot of things about myself, and I feel like I can cope a lot better with these things, and I take medication, and it's part of like who I am now in a positive way. I look at it in a positive way.
Because life generally is quite tough often, isn't it? But there's lots.
Like, a lot of fun to be had.
Lots of
fun. Is
to
that what you're about to say?
No, I wasn't going to do that. But there's lots of reasons, to find happiness often in kind of mundane stuff.
I feel like that is a massive lesson that's hard to actually learn. Like, for myself, it's not about like performing in front of thousands of people or winning an award, because that's like great and fun, but it doesn't make you feel happy. Like, you have to be able to like find happiness and peace in just like having a chat or
Having
like
a chat.
watching TV. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Nice one. That's great. Cheers, Ollie.
Thanks,
Nice
Owen.
one. Cheers, man.
Cheers. Thank
nice
you.
one. I think Ollie's pretty courageous. It's difficult, so difficult to talk about what seems quite an intimate part of your life, to talk about your own experiences with mental distress and, you know, your childhood and you know, really very private parts of your life. And I think the fact he was so willing and open to talk about it is, I think, really helpful for lots and lots of people, including many young people who listen to his music who feel very isolated. And as a country, we desperately need to talk about these issues. We desperately need to have a debate about the help available for millions of people who otherwise suffer in silence. And we need people like Ollie to speak out. If you're someone yourself who's encountered mental distress and you want help, we've included down below in the video description links, organisations to get in contact with. So please do get in touch with people. You're never alone. There's always help out there. So please get in touch.